You've felt it, haven't you? That suffocating weight of always being on, always reachable, always ready to respond, to help, to prove your worth through your availability. Your phone buzzes, and before you even check it, your chest tightens. Another request, another expectation, another piece of yourself given away. But here's what nobody tells you. The moment you stop being endlessly available, everything changes, and the world doesn't like it. Carl Jung understood something most people spend their entire lives avoiding. He saw how we sacrifice our true selves on the altar of other people's expectations, how we become ghosts in our own lives, existing only in the spaces between other people's needs. Think about it. When was the last time you said no without explaining yourself, without that familiar guilt creeping up your spine? We've been conditioned to believe that our value lies in our usefulness to others, that love means limitless access, that success means never missing a call, never declining a meeting, never disappearing. But Jung knew better. He called it individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are, not who the world needs you to be. And it begins with a paradox. To find yourself, you must first be willing to lose everyone else. In our hyper-connected age, we've become addicted to availability. Social media has turned us into 24/7 performance artists, always curating, always responding, always bleeding ourselves dry for hearts and likes and validation that evaporates the moment the screen goes dark. We mistake constant presence for connection. We confuse exhaustion for love. Jung wrote about the persona, the mask we wear to navigate social life. But what happens when the mask becomes permanently fused to your face? When you can no longer remember who you were before you became everyone's solution? Let me tell you about boundaries. Not the polite fiction we've been sold, but the real thing. True boundaries aren't about saying no nicely. They're about recognizing that every yes you give to someone else's urgency is a no to your own becoming. Jung observed patients who had spent decades as perfect employees, perfect spouses, perfect friends, until one day, something inside them shattered. The psyche, he discovered, can only sustain the lie for so long. Eventually, the true self demands its due, often through depression, anxiety, or what he called a neurosis, the soul's rebellion against a life unlived. Consider the modern workplace. You're expected to answer emails at midnight, to be passionate about someone else's profits, to sacrifice your weekends at the altar of team player mythology. And for what? Recognition that lasts as long as your usefulness. Loyalty that extends precisely to the next budget cut. Or relationships, where being a good partner has somehow become synonymous with having no boundaries. Where love is measured in immediate responses and constant emotional labor. Where setting limits is seen as selfishness rather than self-preservation. Jung wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But that privilege has a price most people aren't willing to pay, the discomfort of other people's disappointment." Here's the brutal truth. The moment you stop being infinitely available, you'll discover who actually values you versus who simply values what you can do for them. And the second category? It's larger than you think. Watch what happens when you don't immediately respond to that text, when you decline that meeting, when you choose solitude over another draining social obligation. The reactions will tell you everything. Some will guilt you. You've changed. Others will pressure you. Just this once. Many will simply vanish, revealing that your relationship was nothing more than a transaction dressed up as connection. But something else happens too. Something Jung understood deeply. In the space created by your absence, your true self begins to emerge. The parts of you that have been suffocated by constant availability start to breathe again. Creative impulses long buried under other people's emergencies begin to stir. This isn't about becoming a hermit or severing all connections. It's about understanding that your psyche has limits, that your soul requires periods of withdrawal to maintain its integrity. That constant availability isn't generosity, it's self-abandonment disguised as virtue. Jung spent hours each day in solitude, writing, painting, exploring the depths of his own unconscious. He understood that without these periods of sacred unavailability, he would have nothing genuine to offer anyone. Empty vessels make the most noise, but they pour nothing of value. The shadow, Jung's term for the repressed parts of ourselves, grows larger every time we betray our need for boundaries. Every fake smile, every reluctant yes, every moment we choose others' comfort over our own truth feeds this shadow. Until one day, it consumes us entirely, and we wake up strangers to ourselves. Modern technology has weaponized availability. Read receipts that broadcast your presence, status updates that announce your every move. The tyranny of the green dot that says you're online, available, ready to serve. We've created a culture where privacy is suspicious and boundaries are offensive. Think about the last time you left your phone in another room. That creeping anxiety, that phantom vibration, that fear of missing something important. But important to whom? We've been programmed to prioritize everyone else's urgency over our own peace. We check our phones over 150 times a day, each glance a small betrayal of our attention, a tiny fracture in our ability to be present with ourselves. Jung would have been fascinated by our digital age, not by the technology itself, but by how eagerly we've surrendered our inner lives to it, how we've traded depth for likes, contemplation for notifications, genuine connection for the hollow performance of constant availability. But here's what the architects of this always-on culture don't want you to know. Your unavailability is your power. The space between stimulus and response is where your sovereignty lives. The pause before you answer, the boundary before you commit. These aren't delays. They're declarations of selfhood. When you stop being endlessly available, certain people will call you selfish. Let them. Their definition of selfishness is your definition of self-preservation. Their discomfort with your boundaries is not your emergency to solve. Jung understood that individuation, becoming whole, requires disappointing others. It requires choosing your own psychological development over social approval. It requires recognizing that you cannot save others by drowning yourself. The transformation begins small. An unread message left for a few hours. A request declined without elaborate justification. An evening spent in solitude when others expected your presence. Each boundary is a small revolution, a quiet insistence that your life belongs to you. And yes, you'll lose people. The ones who only knew how to relate to your usefulness, not your being. The ones who confused your availability with your identity. Let them go. Their exit makes room for something infinitely more valuable. Relationships built on mutual respect rather than extraction. Because here's the paradox Jung understood so well. When you stop being available to everyone, you become truly present for the few who matter. When you stop spreading yourself thin, you develop depth. When you stop being everything to everyone, you finally become something to yourself. The world will test your boundaries constantly. It will send emergencies disguised as opportunities, guilt disguised as love, manipulation disguised as need. This is where most people falter. They set a boundary, feel the discomfort of others' reactions, and immediately retreat back into availability. I've watched it happen countless times. Someone finally decides to protect their evening hours, to not check work emails after 8 p.m. The first night, their chest tightens with anxiety. What if something urgent comes up? What if they think I'm not committed? By the third night, they're back to scrolling through messages at midnight, convincing themselves it's just this once. But it's never just once. Because availability is an addiction, and like any addiction, it promises relief while delivering slavery. Each time you break your own boundary, you teach others and yourself that your limits are negotiable, that your needs are secondary, that your peace is always up for auction. But if you can hold firm through that discomfort, something shifts. The universe reorganizes itself around your new reality. People learn to respect what you've made, clear you'll no longer tolerate. And more importantly, you begin to respect yourself in a way that perpetual availability never allowed. Jung said, "I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become." And what you choose, moment by moment, is whether to honor your own needs or sacrifice them on the altar of others' expectations. This isn't a call to cruelty or indifference. It's an invitation to recognize that your first responsibility is to your own psychological wholeness, that you cannot pour from an empty cup, no matter how desperately others hold it out to you. So here's the question that changes everything. What would your life look like if you stopped being infinitely available? Who would you become if you gave yourself the same dedication you've given to everyone else? What parts of your soul have been waiting patiently for you to create the space they need to emerge? The answer isn't comfortable. Growth never is. But on the other side of that discomfort lies something Jung spent his entire life pointing toward: the possibility of becoming who you truly are, not who the world shaped you to be. Your unavailability isn't selfish. It's sacred. Your boundaries aren't walls. They're the foundation upon which your authentic self can finally stand. The moment you stop being endlessly available, everything changes. The question is, are you ready for who you'll meet in that silence? Jung knew the answer. He lived it. He chose the discomfort of disappointing others over the agony of betraying himself. And in that choice lies your liberation, if you're brave enough to claim it.